Okay, guys, we're going to get started. I want to take a quick look at some of the homework that got turned in. And then I think we're going to do a little bit of it ourselves. We're not going to, obviously, the time it would take to properly do this tonally is too much, but I do want to make sure that everybody understands the principal parts of it. I also want to talk a little bit about how I work. I do use tonal retouching still quite a bit. I primarily use frequency separation. Speaking of, that was the assignment for last week. How did that go for you guys? Work out pretty well. It's, yeah, when you get the hang of it, all of a sudden it's like you really realize what's going on, and it changes everything because your stuff still looks real, but it's really being able to work on those distinctly different areas. It's just okay. So I'm gonna look at Kiara's first. And you can see when I come in here, because these are the real areas that I look at for this sort of thing. I'm looking for the texture in here, and then I'm really looking more for the tonal smoothness around the rest of the image. So in one of the notes that I sent back to most of you, or not most of you, but a lot of you, I was saying in those that the tonal retouching large, it's not about, well, and you'll see some other examples of this in just a second. It's not about removing the highlights and the shadows on the skin. So you'll see the highlight on the bridge of her nose. That's actually supposed to be there. That gives her face dimension. The shadows on the side of her cheeks, those help her cheeks recede. So the highlight on her nose is bringing that part of it forward in the image. The shadows on the sides of her cheeks are actually taking that away. So this is what gives an image dimension. And if you remove all of those things, you end up flattening the face. It looks just like it's a two-dimensional plane. So that's not really the goal in this. However, what is the goal in this from a large retouching point, a large tonal point of view, is smoothing the transitions out. So for instance, you can see in this area right here, there's quite a dark line underneath her eye right here. There's a pretty sharp edge right along where the probably blush was actually put on her in makeup. And then there's just sort of like no man's land in between. So what tonal retouching can allow you to do is lift this up a little bit, not eliminate it, because if you eliminate it completely, then again, you run into the problem that her eyes have no dimension, and eyes have dimension. So it's about smoothing stuff out. So the large tonal scale is about not eliminating the natural highlights and shadows of the face. It's really about the blotchiness of the skin. So one of the places that I can always point to that is really indicative of what I'm talking about right here, you can just drop it there because other people will be doing it, but thanks. You can see this area right here, it's dark. So you've got a light area that's coming down here. You get into this little dark patch and then it goes light again. It's not necessarily that I need to lift this so much that it matches the areas that are on both sides, but I feel like the transition there is too dramatic. So it's a question of softening this part up. It's the same thing about the shadow that happens right up on her upper lip. So that's what that part is all about. The reason I'm showing you this image right now is that you can actually take a look at your, and I keep stressing this, you need to look at your layer masks by themselves. You need to look at your tonal retouching by itself. You need to look at the hair patch. There's hair patches that a lot of you did. You need to look at those by themselves to try to spot the problems that you don't necessarily see when you're looking at the totality of your image. So if I actually look at this, and I'll turn this on and off, and you can see that what it's basically doing, it's not really taking care of much of the texture of the skin. Some of it changes a little bit, but if I hold down my option key and click on the eyeball, you can see this is the retouching that was done. And the first thing that I look at when I see this is that this brush is completely too hard. Look at this. You can see look at this circle right here. That's 100% hard brush. That's never, ever, ever going to do this kind of work. You've got to blend this stuff in. And it is just too apparent. Look at the same thing right here. All of these lines, all of this is drawn. So this was never, ever, ever going to work. The brushes are also way too big. So, and I spot all of that just sitting here looking at this. at that one thing. So to sort of extend that conversation a little bit further, I'm going to take a look at alleys really quickly. So in alleys, this part was actually pretty well done. So a lot of people, the question always becomes how far do you take this? How far do you go, right? So for me, when I look at this, this is a vast improvement over what it was. So if, again, we turn off the retouching there and then turn this back on, it's a vast improvement. Do I think it could go further? I do, but I will argue that it becomes this balancing act at a certain stage of the game. When do you completely remove the texture of all the pores in her skin, and when do you not, right? And so typically what I do is I will take it all the way. I will remove every single thing. This will just be flat. Not looking like plastic skin. It'll still have, you know, the texture of her skin, but really diminish the pores. And then if I feel the need to bring them back, I will simply put a layer mask on the on this tonal retouching small, and I'll pull it slightly back. But that's not really the reason I actually opened up your picture. The reason I opened up your picture was this. So if you take a look at her hair fix, let me zoom out just a little bit. So this is where it is right here. It's actually really well done, I think. And it's funny because her hairs, when we actually shot this picture, the hair person was actually making it really, really like bone straight. She doesn't have the best hair in the world, but bone straight. And so I always feel like it should have a little bit of curve in it, a little bit of, it should like just a little bit. So a lot of times I will push that into it because you can do that with a simple transform. But the reason I'm showing yours is that I'm going to hold down the Option key and click on this, and you can see what I see is a problem. I spot this part right here, and this just tells me that in this area right here, old hair is going to be coming through, and all of a sudden these strands of hair just start in the middle of nowhere. So to fix this at this scale, what I would do is I'm going to open up the hair fix and find out, because there's a couple of images in here that represent where this thing is. That might be one of them right there, but I think it's this one. So this one, not even looking at my image, I can click on the mask, hold on the Option key, and look at that, and I can see where the problem is right here. I'm going to turn all of this back on. Go to my layer mask, hit the B key to get a brush. Make sure that white is my foreground color, a much smaller brush, and about a 50% hard brush, because again, it's mixing into the other strands of hair that you've already got. These over here that you've already got that are on a completely different layer. Normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow, and I would simply fill this in and also this. And then at the end of it all, turn everything back on. I'm going to do a quick snapshot of this and take a look at what the difference is. So this is where we are right now. This is where it started. This is where we are right now, and this is where it started. And you can see, it's only if you're paying really attention to this area right in here, but it definitely gets better with that part actually fixed out of it. And we may clean it up a little bit more, but nonetheless, it's always looking for the holes. You didn't do it in this one, but a lot of people actually do transparency in the brushwork that they do when they're adding hair. And if you're doing transparency, so when I say transparency, I'm talking about something that would look like this. That transparency allows old texture to come through the new texture, and you're mixing the two of them together, and that just looks like mud. So again, when you're doing this kind of work, even though you think you might be getting away with it, you're really not. And the truth of it is, if you're actually using opacity to control this, whether it's a brush or the opacity of the layer, or you're using a flow on a brush on a mask, or any of those kind of things that can introduce transparency, it becomes problematic. So anyway, just throwing that out. There's another example that I've got of the same thing for a different reason. Can you see this hard line right here? This is the retouch. And you can spot it a mile away. So you can't do these things just starting and stopping in the middle of someone's hair, not unless you're really willing to go in there and on every single, at a point where you can really paint it in hair by hair so that you are extending a hair that is from the original into the patch. You've got to replace all of the hair. You've got to take your patch so that it goes all the way to the edge of your frame to actually pull it off. And finally, Gretchen's I thought was actually well done. Just take a look at a couple things here, but this is the quality of the skin work right here. And again, like Allie, she still left in a little bit of the texture of the skin. It's debatable. I probably would have pushed it a little bit further, but nonetheless. But the thing that's tripping her up in all of this are the little white dots that remain. And the only way to get rid of those little white dots, again, you cannot do that tonally. They're too light. There's nothing to really burn in anymore. So you just end up with halos, dark halos around these little white dots. They've got to be taken care of in your pixel layer. And typically for me, if I was going to do this work, I would come into your pixel retouch layer. I'm going to do this with a, you could do this with a clone stamp tool. We can try that. I would set it to a darken blend mode. I would have it as a completely soft brush here because you're using the blending mode to control where the colors actually laid down. So even though I've got a hard brush, I'm not going to see the edges of it because I'm only darkening this area. So the area around it should not be picking up any color. So I'm going to click to sample right there and just do one pop and another pop, and that takes care of those. And so on. And it's, again, all done on this pixel layer. That would have been the thing to actually tweak that out. And then one final thing, which goes back to kind of the conversation we were having in the very beginning. This tonal large right here, when you can see what's happening here overall in the retouching, the natural highlights in her face are actually being pressed down. And then again, another highlight on the other side is being pressed down. So that's not the goal of this. The goal of that large tonal retouch layer is to smooth out the skin. For anybody who's ever worn foundation, the idea of, in makeup, the idea of foundation is that you put it, your skin has got all sorts of different like tonalities and colors in it. Some areas are redder, some areas are less red, some are darker, some are lighter. There's this whole blotchiness. And the goal of doing foundation is to smooth that part out. And you see it in standard beauty. It's actually one of the things that comes up when people challenge how much image has been retouched from a beauty perspective or a skin perspective, and it's because the skin just seems to be too flawless. Well, what they're really talking about, it's not so much the pores, although the pores definitely play a role in this, but it's really the evenness of the skin. And so at any rate, I just wanted to sort of make sure everybody understood that part. Any questions about any of this? All right, so I would like to do some of this really quickly, I think. Hang on 1 second. Yeah, so if you want to, do me a favor, open up a virgin copy of this. Do not do this on yours. Well, you can certainly do this on yours if you want to, whatever, but I just tend to like working on this stuff from scratch, if that's what I've ultimately got to do. Again, if you've got a tablet, now would be the time to whip it out and turn it on because it's just that kind of work. I feel like this podium is like a prison. It's the smallest little surface in the world, and it's like I can't do anything really with it. Actually, before we get to that, I want to show you something else really quickly first. Oh, before we even get to that part. So the academic progress reports went in over the weekend. That's when they were due. And some of you are doing really well in this class, and some of you are not doing so well in this class. I still feel like everybody in this class has the opportunity to pass, but if you're struggling or you're falling behind, you need to step up your game. You need to get in the work. It needs to no longer be late. You got to get stuff in on time, and you've got to spend time doing it right. So you need to score well on that, get the work in on time. And if you're having any issues at all, you need to get in touch with me so that we can get together. I can help you outside of this class. I made that commitment to you guys on the very day one of this class. I've never lost sight of that commitment. So, but you need to reach out to me. I can't force myself on anyone. So anyway, just throwing that out there. We've got 6 weeks left in the semester, and I'm pulling for everybody in this class. So anyway, yeah, I want to do something else first, something that's relatively new. Anybody in here shoot film? Okay, and then you scan it and work on it digitally. Yeah, and how do you feel about dust on film? What? It totally sucks, right? So I'm going to show you a way to deal with dust in film, but I don't want everybody to think, oh, this is just about people who shoot film. This is not just about people who shoot film. You can use this technique in a whole lot of situations, so that's where we're going to go to first, and then we'll jump in and do some work on this same image. So to start with, go to your, I think it's going to be in your session 8. So let me get there with you and we'll find out. Yeah, in your session 8 folder, there is a PSD file called dust removal. If you can open that up in Photoshop. And double click on it. If you zoom into the upper left-hand corner, you can see exactly what's going on. There's not only a lot of dust, so this is a real piece of film. There's dust on this, there's a scratch in it. I mean, this is a mess. And so most people would actually go after this again, either using the clone stamp tool or the healing brush tool. But I think there's a much faster way of doing this, and also a way that allows you to do more complicated dust removal. We'll talk about that in just a second. So the way I do it, did everybody have this image open? Okay, so to start off with, again, very first thing, Command-J, make a copy of your image so that you're not working on the original. So my next move is, once I've made this thing, I'm going to come up to my filter menu, and I'm going to come down to noise, down to dust and scratches. So again, up to your filter menu, down to noise, down to dust and scratches, and open this up. And when it opens up, this is actually an old tool. This has been around in Photoshop forever. And I'm just going to show you basically the way I use it, how to make it work. So the first thing you need to do is you need to zero the radius and the threshold out. So grab both of those little triangles and drag them as far to the left as you can. Your radius can't go below 1, but your threshold can go down to 0. So to explain what this tool does is it actually looks at your image. So right now it's looking at my image, and it's saying, okay, where are there places where there is a really big tonal jump? So you can see where this little black spot of dust is right here. There's a big tonal jump right next to it. So what radius does is it says, well, how big are those little dots? How big should we be looking at and calling that a dot or a speck of dust before we jump to the outside? So if you start to raise your radius and watch this little dot here, I'm also watching the scratch. I'm watching a couple of other things in here. Before we get too much deeper into this, let me also say, if you've got one giant ass piece of dust on your image and it's the only one, you don't want to raise this radius to go after that guy. Go after that guy with the clone stamp tool, hit that one out. This is more for this more general, oh yeah, it's all over my file kind of dust, not the one big sensor blob or whatever. It's more like this. So I'm going to actually select the number 1 radius. You set your radius before you do your threshold. Say what? So it's up to the filter menu, down to noise, down to dust and scratches. So at any rate, and then zero everybody out. Okay, so so you set your radius first, and then we'll talk about what threshold is in just a second. So with the radius is a 1, I select it, and then I'm going to hit 2, and I can still see the dust. I'm going to hit the backspace and hit 3. I can still see the dust. Backspace, hit a 4. It's going away, but it's still there. Backspace, hit a 5. And in the 5, that one big spot of dust is actually gone. You also need to move your image around to make sure that you're not looking at dust that's actually on your screen. Because if your screen looks anything like mine, I've got dust all, well, I think it's really my spit when I lecture is all over my screen. So, but at any rate, if you move this around, you can see then whatever's not moving is on your screen, not on the image. So for me, the 5 actually works that it gets rid of pretty much everything that I wanted to get rid of. So let me check down here to make sure. Yeah. So threshold. So what threshold is threshold, you're saying, okay, how much tonal difference do I need between that spot of dust and the background, or the spot of dust and whatever it's on? So if you take the threshold slider, you can see it starts at 0. If you go all the way to the opposite side, you get to 255. This is just the tonal range that we work with in Photoshop. So at 255, you're saying to this filter, okay, the dust needs to be jet black and the background needs to be pure white, because that's the only situation where you would have 250 tone difference in the two. One would have to be 0, the other would have to be 255. What it really is designed to do, if you drag it all the way back down, specifically for film, is you need to bring up your threshold as much as you can before you get the dust to come back. So in film, the way that usually translates is that you're restoring the grain to the film. So typically when I do this work on most film, I'll get up to a threshold kind of in the 20s. That is not going to happen with this image. So you'll see you can do the same thing with your using the backspace key and your number keys. So with a threshold of 0, I do not see the dust. If I go to a 1, I still don't see the dust. I'm going to go to a 2, to a 3, to a 4, and at 4, I still don't have anything back. 5, that's a 56, that's not what I want. 5, 6. At 6, I'm just beginning to get the scratch back in my image, and if I move my image around, yeah, well, the 6, I'm just beginning to get that sense of the scratch back in. So I'm going to go back to 5. So again, this is just, you set the radius first, and then you try to get the threshold as high as you possibly can before the dust comes back. But this stage of the game, I end up with 5 pixels for the radius and 5 for the level. So if you want to do this, that's what my values are. You can use your preview to turn it on and off, and you can sort of see what you're actually really getting. I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. And then immediately you need to come over and you need to make a history snapshot of what you've just done. So the little camera that's at the bottom of your history palette, click on it. It'll then call it snapshot number 1. You need to go up there and click on the name and rename snapshot 1 to dust and scratch. And then we need to come down to where there was only the layer copy. I don't want a version that has the filter applied to it. So you could come down and pick dust and scratch again and then just go back one step. You need to see all of the mess that's on your image back again. So we went through that whole process simply to build a history state where the dust was gone. So I am not going to pick my history state up at the top. I'm simply going to click the little box to the left so that when I use my history brush, it will paint onto my image what it looked like when I made that state. Again, you don't want to pick this state, because if you pick it, you lose all the dust and you lose all the dust. But you also look what you did to the image. I mean, the image is like, this is I mean, the guy's so soft, that's just, it's unusable. So again, I'm going to come back to where I made that layer copy. I'm just clicking the space to the left of the dust and scratch to say, when you use the history brush, this is how I want you to use it. So then we're going to pick the history brush. It's right underneath the clone stamp tool. If you click on this, you get a history brush. But now in the case of what we're doing here, we want to be really, we want to do the least amount of change, the least amount of damage possible to this. And so in order to do that, I'm looking in this image and I can say, okay, well, I'm seeing dark dust on a light background. So I'm going to use blending modes of this history brush to restrict what gets changed. And so if I click on the drop-down menu of my history brush from normal down to lighten, then when I paint on this stuff, it will actually remove only the dust. It will not change the area around it, because the area that is around it it never got lightened. The dust and scratch filter didn't do that kind of change to the area that is around it. So I'm going to make my brush smaller using the P key. I am going to change the blending mode of my brush to make sure it's a completely soft brush. And then you can see, I'm going to actually zoom out just a little bit so my brush is effectively bigger. And I can just paint down the scratch and it's gone. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more on this. I can do all of this work on the dust that's around. And all of that works out really well. However, that still seems to be time consuming in the same way it would be if I was doing a clone stamp tool. So I'm going to go back 2 steps in history state. I'm going to do Command Option Z once, Command Option Z again. If you're using the new version of Command Z, you don't have to add the Option key. I'm just going back to where I haven't done any of this. I'm going to zoom back out now. I'm going to grab my lasso tool, hit the L key. We're just going to make a selection. And I'm going to make a selection of this whole area of beach that's in the background. You want to stay away from the guy, but you want to get kind of close. So anyway, I'm going to just start down here. I'm going to run up along here like this. You can be pretty loose about all this. I'm going to grab all of this part and then around and down. So I've got a really big area of this part of the image that is selected right now, and I can fill with history. So to do that, come up to your Edit menu, down to Fill. Dialog box will open up. In terms of the contents, the drop-down menu, you want to say History, but now you also want to use blending modes for this. Again, you don't want to completely change this thing. You simply want the areas on here that are too dark to be lightened, the areas, the specks of dust. So in your drop-down menu for your blending mode, you simply pick Lighten and then say OK. And all the dust in that scratch is just gone. I can now come over to the other side over here, Command D to deselect, and I can pick all this area over here and do the same thing. This time when you go to your Edit Fill menu, it will be set up the way you want it to be, and I'll say OK. I'm going to go down to the lower beach down here, click and draw in all of this. And do Edit, Fill, OK. I missed area down here on the bottom, so I'll start down here as well. Edit, Fill, OK. And then finally the area in the middle. That doesn't mean I'm getting everything in those areas, but I'm doing the heavy lifting first. And then I can go back and take a peek at everybody else, and anything that I've missed, I'll go in and hit. But you have to admit, this is infinitely easier than going in and having to hit every single speck of dust. Okay, I need everybody to zoom in to this. If you'll take a look where the guy's got his arm around the girl, come into the area that's really close to her hand. And you can see right underneath her hand, there's a little speck of white dust that's right on her shirt. So the way dust works is, dust is actually, what it does is it's, you don't really see the dust on the scan itself. You're seeing the absence of light. And so what happens is that on areas that are, it's the absence of the image that's actually coming through. So in areas that are light, like where we started, the area that's up in that upper right-hand corner, this light area right here, dust shows up there as being dark. But in areas where things are dark, dust shows up as being light. And that is exactly what's going on with this girl on her sweater, on her shirt right here. So I'm going to go back to my history brush to get this part. So again, it is the brush that's right underneath the clone stamp tool. And I'm going to come over here. I'm not going to change this. I want to go ahead and leave my blending mode set to lighten just so that you understand what's going on. And if you now scrub over this thing, you'll actually see you do not get rid of that speck of dust. And that's because your blending mode has been set to only lighten. It already is too light. You need to do the opposite. So click on your drop-down menu and go to darken instead and get rid of it. It's that simple. If we come over and we take a look at his jacket and his chest and the surfboard, you can see there's a series of really bad scratches that are going along there. I'm going to again change my, I need to actually now lighten this area because again it's dark spots on a light body. So I'm going to change my blending mode of my brush again from darken to lighten. I'm going to make my brush considerably smaller because I'm worried that some of the hair in here might be affected by that as well. I mean, again, this filter is not discriminating between hair and scratches, but then I'm simply going to run my brush up along here and you can see it actually does a remarkably good job of getting rid of all of that. And I can continue working my way on up. I don't have to resample. It still continues up along his jacket. I don't need to resample there. I can just continue to work it up there. And that part's gone. And then the scratches that are on the surfboard, I can go after those. I can go after this part coming down. So you see, I mean, again, I can keep working on this forever, but it's infinitely faster than doing this with a clone stamp tool or healing brush tool. Questions about any of this? Did this work for you guys? That's a thumbs up. Callie, you have a question? That's a thumbs up too. I love the thumbs up. What can I say? Okay, you can throw this guy, well, you can get rid of it. You don't need to save it. It's not part of your homework. Okay. So now I do want to actually open up the image that we were working at, the Skin Eyes Retouch. If you can get a virgin copy of it, that'd be great. It is in our session number 6. That's where the assignment started. So if you go into your session number 6 folder and then look inside the assignment folder, you will actually find a copy of this, a virgin copy of this. So that's where I'm going to start. And also, if you're in there, I made this mention to a number of you guys in here as well. And I pointed this out when you were getting ready to do the assignment, that there were these reference photos in here that were going to help show you successful versions of doing both large tonal retouching and small. This is what the large one would look like right here. And this is what the small one looked like right here. And you can see the amount of work and detail that's actually in this thing. And so for those of you who had a little bit under one eye and a couple of dots and that was it was clearly not enough, because this is what it actually takes to get to the point that you needed to get to. So at any rate, with this thing open, I'm going to show you how I set my stuff up, or how I would do this. My first move is to make a copy of this layer. It's going to be where my pixel retouching is. So Command J and then double click on this and rename it Pixel Retouch. And then my next one is I'm going to hold down my Option key and click on Add a New Layer. So if you hold down your Option key, it just lets you set up a whole series of variables. You can do it after the fact, but this just keeps it all in one place and just makes it faster and neater. So holding down your Option key, click on the Add Layer. It's the little square at the bottom of your Layers palette that has the plus in the middle. Click on this, and this is what I meant. It'll bring open this dialog box, and you can rename this Tonal Retouch Small. And then in the blending mode drop down, click it from normal, bring this down to soft light. And then finally, where it says fill with neutral color, you want to put a check right there and then say okay. So this is now going to be the work that I do on the small layer. I'm just going to duplicate this layer because it's faster. Command J, and then double click on the name, and you are going to get rid of the small copy and call it large. How do I do what? I'll show you. I'm just going to do the second one. I'll go ahead and do the first one again. Okay, so you've got the very top one selected, right? Hold down your Option key and then just click on the little square at the bottom with the plus. And in your dialog, type in for the name, Tonal Retouch Small. And then again, click on the drop down for the blending mode and go from normal to soft light. And then finally, click on the check mark to put in fill with neutral color and say okay. All right, are we good on this part? And then again, I just duplicate this. I want a small layer and I want a large layer, and this is why. If you go back out and take a look at these two, you can see this is the stuff that was done on the small layer, and it's incredibly intricate work. It takes forever to do it. I mean, you guys, if you really spent the time to do this right, it takes hours to do this stuff. But if you then look at the large layer and this, if you do the tonal work small first and then you do this on top of it, if you make a mistake, they're in the same layer. The only way to fix it is to start from the very beginning. You have to redo all your small work. Nobody wants to do that. So if you separate your large from your small, if you make a mistake on the large layer, I can throw this thing away and start over again. The large only takes half hour to do. It's the small stuff that takes 8 hours. So you do not want them together, because if you make a mistake on the large, you have to redo the 8 hours on your small over again. There's no way to separate them. So again, this is the voice of experience. If you hear any sort of like remorse, regret, how many thousands of hours I've lost in my life because I fucked this up, then you're hearing it correctly. So at any rate, back in here, I'm just going to make a copy of this, Command J, double click on the name and get rid of the small copy and just name it Tonal Retouch Large. Okay. So then I'm going to pick foreground, and dodging and burning colors. I'm going to zoom into this girl's face. I'm simply going to click what I would think to be a neutral color. So I'm going to click on my color picker to open it up. The thing you want to avoid in all of this is that you want to stay away from areas where you think there might be makeup. You want to stay away from sunburns. You want to stay away from bruising. You want to stay away from shadows. You want to stay away from highlights. You want just a normal kind of middle of the road skin color, right? And so I figure like somewhere on the side of her nose, right about here, is probably a good shot for this. So I'm simply going to click on it. Now when I do that, my color picker gives me the color of her skin. So it's a hue of 28 degrees. That's all I care about. That was the only thing that I was searching for to do this. At this stage of the game, then I need to modify this. This is going to be my dodging color. It's going to make things lighter. I'm dodging things out. So to do that in your color picker, in the HSB grouping right here, your first move is to select on the radio button for B, which is brightness. And you need to crank your brightness up. So I bring mine typically up to the low 90s. So somewhere between 90 and 95 is typically where I will bring mine. But we still have way too much color in this. It's too saturated. So click on the S radio button to get to the saturation, and you need to bring that down. Now, if you go all the way down, you remove all the color. You have a light gray. That is not what we want. We want to keep a little bit of color in there. So I typically do this somewhere in the low teens, somewhere between a 10 and 15 usually works for me. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. That is now my dodging color. For my burning color, again, I can now click on the background color to open up that color picker. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to click on a spot that's right on the side of her nose. And you can see now I've got a hue of 27 degrees. It's very close to 28. I could change it to 28 if I was absolutely crazed about this, but I'm not. 27 is close enough. again, I'm going to click on my brightness slider, the radio button right next to the B, and I'm going to drag this down. And again, you don't want to go all the way down. If you go all the way down, you hit black. That's actually too strong. But I want to have some tone in there. So in this case, my brightness is again kind of in that 10 to 15 range, somewhere in there. I can still see some color in mine. However, I think I need a little more color in mine, especially when you're doing the darker stuff. You need to amp up the color a little bit. So I'm going to click on the saturation part, and I'm going to push it up slightly. So I'm sort of in the low 40s for my saturation, low teens for my brightness, and the color was picked by my targeting adjustment tool. So I'm gonna go ahead and say okay to that. And then we are not going to work on the area that's down on the on the pimple that's on her chin. We're gonna go after this area that's right here. Now, I will tell you there's other things that I do on this part first, and this is a way, especially if you have a larger monitor, that'll make this easier to work on. One of the, yes? So for my foreground color, I have a saturation of 12. So how many of you, when you were doing this work, when you zoomed in tight, so I'm going to zoom in pretty tight on mine. I'm at 200% on mine. Sometimes I'll work in on 300%, but a lot of times the more you zoom in, the longer this process takes, because you cannot cover as much area as if you're zoomed out. If you're zoomed out too far, you can't really be specific enough or precise enough to actually hit the area that you want to hit. So it's this battle going back and forth. But for those of you who did this work and who really came in on this, did you ever have a problem that when you then zoomed out, it was like, oh, Jesus, this has gone way too far. It's just like it looked completely different, right? So what most people, myself included, do with this is that you do two views of the same file. One that's zoomed in where you can do the work, but the other that's zoomed out so you can have this reference. I mean, you can do the zooming in and out the whole time you're working on this, but it's just easier to have both of them available. So to get both of them available, you do not want to make a copy of this image, because if you make a copy of the image, the work that you do on one is not reflected on the other, so that's not going to help you at all. However, you can do a different view of the same image. That's what we're looking for. To get to that, you come up to your window menu, down to Arrange, down to New Window for Skin Eyes Retouch.psd. So look up at my screen to see where I'm at, the window menu, down to Arrange, and over to New Window for Skin Eyes Retouch. This will open up another just view of your image right here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this guy. So I'm at about 66% on this one guy, and I'm just going to push it over to the side. And then I'm going to grab my retouching. So this way I can work on the really big zoomed in version of it all, but I see what's going on in my zoomed out version at the same time. Now, if I have it rigged like this, I cannot see whether I've got a foreground or a background color that's actually black or white. So I'm going to make my zoomed out image smaller, because I need to be able to see which I've got going. And then I can still work on my big one right here. I can make it a little bit smaller too and push it a little bit over to the side. This is much easier to do on a larger monitor. So now I'm ready to go. So again, typically what I start with, and this is just me, I start with for me when I look at this, the dark spots are the ones that are the most obvious to me. So I start with the lightning part of this. So that's where I'm going to go. My dodging color is my foreground color right now, so I'm good to go. I typically will keep, I'm right-handed, so I have my right hand on my tablet and I have my left hand on the X key, because that allows me to go back and forth between dodging and burning. You simply hit the X key and it flips it. So I've got my dodging colors on the outside right now. So the last thing that I need to do, I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I need to check all of my settings for my brush. So my brush right now, I need to clip on that. I need to make a completely soft brush. I need to change the mode from, mine was set to luminosity because I work with all sorts of different blending modes for my brushes, but I'm going to bring it back to normal. I'm going to leave my opacity at 100%, and I'm going to take my flow down to 6%. 6% is a really good place to start doing heavy work on Caucasian skin. Now, in this case, I'm having trouble getting it, so I'm just going to type in 6 and hit the enter key. when we do the tonal large retouching on this, that's actually going to go down when you're doing that because it's much less subtle. If you take a look at the area that are underneath her eyes, it's much less dark than this area of these pores that are actually in here. It's considerably lighter, so you want to bring your flow down. Sometimes when I'm doing really detailed work, my flow will be 1%. So anyway, that's basically how I'm going to go about doing this. So the B key, I've got that. And I'm going to select this image right here, make my brush much smaller, and I'm just going to start tapping. So I'm working my way along in here, and I'm really looking at, you got to focus on this stuff. I keep moving. I don't stay in any one place too long to make sure that it looks perfect in this. That's not the goal in any of this part. I'm looking for more of a mid kind of tone in here. So I'm just going to continue to work my way around here. And I'm going to stay in this area for a little while. If you get bored with this part and you say to yourself, well, it's not doing anything at all, make sure that you can, and actually I'm working on my large layer right now, which was a mistake. Yes?
Sorry, I was just going to ask, is there like a certain part you're looking to like tap on? Or is it just all of the skin?
It's all, no, so anyway, see all these little dark areas right in here? All of those? Here, I'll zoom in even more. It's all these dark valleys. All of these areas, and all this darkness in here, all of that, these lighter areas, I stay, like this ridge right here, I stay away from that. That's much lighter. So it's really just these darker areas that I'm going in here, but I'm really hyper specific about it. Make sense? I've done all of this work so far on my tonal large, but I haven't done anything else, so I'm going to rename this tonal large small. I'm just going to trade them because I don't want to undo the work that I've already done. You should not have this problem. And then I'm going to grab my tonal small, my original one, and bring it to the top and rename that tonal large. Are you asking what percentage of the opacity of my brush is? 6. So again, I can zoom in and I can work really tight like this, but the problem I have with that is this is now a much bigger area of dark. Everything is bigger, right? So I have to spend a lot more time working in this area right in here. So I'm in at 500%. You don't need to be in at 500%. You can actually take this down to, again, 300% would be the biggest I would go in here. If I was pressed for time, I would actually do it at 200%. But this gets me back to where I'm actually working. So now I'm working on my small layer. And again, if you turn the layer on and off right now, you can see the difference that it's made. And so you can see all of those little dark spots in there. I've gotten rid of all of those little dark spots. I haven't touched the mid-tone ones that are around it, and I haven't touched the light dots that are around this either. So, but I got a long way to go. And then if you look over on your larger image here, and you do the same thing, you can actually spot a little bit, not much. Well, you can sort of see it right in there. You can see it's happening. So then again, back on my tonal small layer, still with my dodging tool, I start to go, again, and I move around a lot. You find if you stay in one spot too long, it ends up not even resembling. It ends up almost as if you've isolated it from the rest of the skin. You'll never actually believe that part. So again, I'm going to continue to work on this part. And I'm still only doing dodging in all of this. And I'm tapping this at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Still think the idea of using a tattoo pen would actually be great. However, at a certain point, you're going to get really bored with all the dodging part. And you're going to say to yourself, okay, I need to go to the burning part. And now you can look at areas in here that clearly are standing out as being too light. So I'm going to hit the X key to get to my burning tool. And the burning tool tends to, a lot of times, I think, be more aggressive. So if you find it's too aggressive, then lower your opacity down even more. Bring it down to 4% or something like that. But I'll see what it looks like. So now, again, I'm only looking to tap on the lighter areas that are in any of this, and your eye will sort of begin to pick up on it.
I have a question.
Shoot.
So I was thinking, like, all right, let's say I fuck up big time.
Yep.
and I don't want to restart the whole thing.
Yep.
If I single out my small layer, let's say, and I choose to do the exact neutral gray to draw over it and like refill it,
Yes.
is that fine?
Oh, totally. So what you're talking about, again, if you hold down your Option key and click on this layer that we're working on right now, so just click on the eyeball, you can, this is the work that I've actually done. If there's something wrong in here, you can do exactly that. The only problem that I have with this is that if you get rid, because if you want to be painting with a perfect 50% gray, you can make that, but then you're going to have to remake your dodging and burning color again. So if that happens, if you want, and guys, a lot of people do this. There are a set of tool palettes that come with the default version of Photoshop that I threw most of them away because most people don't use them. But there is one tool that you can bring back for this work that will actually save your dodging and burning colors. So to do that, to get to those really quickly, come up to your window palette, up to your window menu, and we're going to come down to swatches. And in swatches, this thing will open up. You can have a series of swatches that are in here. You can also have different views of your swatches. So by default, this is the small view right here. But if you click on the little the little menu thing that's to the right of the swatches part, you'll get a dropout group. You can do large thumbnails, small thumbnails, tiny thumbnails. I would do the large thumbnail. That's what I've got going on here. Click on the drop down menu again, and you can also do a small list or a large list. If you click on the list, you'll get them on the side. It just depends on how you want to actually do your stuff. But right now, I have got a foreground color that is my dodging color. If you click on the little plus at the bottom, it'll actually open up a dialog box, and I would call this dodging. I would name it actually after my file, because this stuff should be specific. So I could call this, it's called Skin as Retouch, so I will shorten this to SEER Dodge. All right, this is actually my burning color, sorry, it's the darker one. Burn. And say okay. And it'll show up right here at the top. And then, or right here at the very bottom with the name of it. And then you can hit the X key to get your foreground color. And then you can save that one. And again, I would name it the same thing and below, go on, blah, 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 blah. Then this thing you can park. You can collapse it or you can keep it up. But now you could go really quickly temporarily into your foreground color. If you want a perfect neutral gray, which you would want, middle gray for this to erase the areas that you're talking about erasing, to do those, the easiest way to do it is you don't really care about what your hue is. Your saturation drops to 0 and your brightness goes to 50%. And that will give you a perfectly neutral gray. And that's what you type in. I'm going to cancel out of this though because I don't want to change mine. I'm going to hold my Option key and click on the rest of this. So now we can actually start to see what's happening here, and you can see that the skin in general in this area is beginning to smooth out. You can actually take a look at it on your other version over here. I'm going to go to my other version and zoom in just a little bit more, and then slide that over and slide this over. So now when I do this on and off, that's beginning to work there. You can see it's beginning. I'm going to continue just a little bit more work on here. We've got a lot to get to today, but I just want to make sure that everybody is comfortable understanding how this thing works and when to actually do it. And let me make it a little smaller and move it over. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my burning tool here just to do a little bit more. X key to actually go to my dodging tool because I'm getting back into this area that needs a little bit more dodging. X key because I'm still in that same area and I can burn this stuff in. And I don't actually ever stop tapping. I just use the X key and just keep trying to move around. I don't think about tapping a lot. Oops. You'll find yourself making mistakes like I just did. I went for, I thought I had my burning tool, and it was really my dodging tool. So every now and then, check to make sure that what you're doing is what you really want to be doing. And so now you can take a look at the difference in my two right now. So again, I'm going to turn this guy on and off, and you can see I'm beginning to actually smooth the tonality part of this out. If you take a look at my my larger version of this image, you can see I'm doing the same thing. Am I there yet? No, I'm nowhere close. But if you keep at this, as you start to really knock these things down, then you can start to even come in on these smaller areas and hit those, and ultimately you will smooth all of this out. Are there questions about this? Okay, I'm going to close up this first version, my really blown in, really tight version of it. It doesn't matter. You won't get a save or do anything because it's just two windows of the same thing. I'm going to double click on my hand, and now I'm actually going to work on the larger layer. So I'm going to click on my tonal large layer now to actually do bigger overall stuff for her. So I'm going to zoom into my image right now, and the first thing that I'm going to go after would be the areas that are underneath her eyes. Again, I'm looking to smooth tone out. I'm looking to smooth transitions out. So I'm going to go after her eye. It would be her eye, to our left. That's where I'm going to start on all of this. In the tonal retouch larger, I don't feel like I need that second image to look at, or the second view to be looking at this, because I'm zoomed out enough I can actually see the overall. So I'm going to go to my tonal retouching large. I'm going to hit my brush again. I'm going to make it considerably bigger so that it's much closer to the size of the area that I'm trying to fix in here. I'm going to pull my flow down even more. I'm going to go down to like a 4%, 2 or 3, 4%, somewhere in there, because I think this is going to need more. I'm going to zip in a little bit on this. And then again, I'm using my dodging tool, so I'm just going to start tapping, and I'm going to run my way across this. And again, the goal is not to completely eliminate it. The goal is just to lift it enough so that the transition is smoother in. And mine is already right now. It's just it took a few taps to actually get that. Now there's some small work that needs to be done in here, those little lines that are running in there. If you were going to be crazed about that, I would go after that part. I'm going to zip back out, and then there's a really sort of dark area that's right on the side of her nose right here. I'm going to go after that. It's this part right in here. Again, this 4%, 3% actually may be too strong. So I'm going to run it up like that. No, it's not too strong, but you hit it in one shot. So I'm going to continue to work my way along that area that's right on the side, and that's enough of that. There is a small transition area right here between the two, so I'm going to make my brush a lot larger and just tap down here just a little bit to soften that line up, and that's all that takes to get. Then I'm on the complete other side right now, on the right side of her cheek, close to where we were working earlier. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. There's sort of like the ball of her cheek right here is a little bit too dark, so I'm just going to lighten that part up. I'm going to go after the mustache line. There's two parts to it. There's an overall bigger shadow, and then there is a lighter, there's a smaller, darker one, so I've got to change my brush size to get that. So in here, make my brush a little bit smaller, and sort of run up this line right here. And then I'm going to zip back out and see exactly what it is I've done. So turning on and off your tonal retouch layer, you can see these are very subtle adjustments, but they make a whole world of difference. They change everything. I'm not going after the highlights and the shadows of her skin. As a matter of fact, a lot of people would say, you can not only do this part here, but you can actually accentuate the dimension of her face. So what that would ultimately mean is that if you take a look at the bridge of her nose, that actually should be lighter to give it more dimension, to actually have her nose come more forward out of the photograph. So you can still do this on your tonal large layer. I've still got my dodging color here. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. So in this case, trying to do this by hand, just doing taps, becomes a challenge because it's, if you see the highlights that are on people's noses, they tend to be almost drawn like with a ruler. They tend to be very, very, very straight. So I'm going to bump my flow up to 6% again because I want to make this a serious, pretty serious highlight. Not 9%, but 6 or 7. So working on this layer, what you can do is, I'm going to come here. You don't want to start up at her forehead. That's not where the bridge of her nose is. It really starts about here between her eyes. If you, again, I've got my dodging color that's in the top right here. If you click once and then hold down your shift key and click a second time, it'll draw a straight line down. To see it, because it's really subtle right here, I'm going to show you what it looks like on my tonal retouch large layer. I'm going to hold down the option key and click on the eyeball. It's this line right here that I just made. You don't even need to keep looking at this thing. You can do this repeatedly. So again, I'm going to tap here, hold down my shift key, and tap at the end. And you can see it just makes that totally straight line. So I'm going to go back and see how that looks in person. So I'm going to turn this on and off, and you can see it gives her nose more dimension. It's actually coming forward to me a little bit more right now, and we can continue to do all sorts of things like that. Questions about this? Okay, just so that you know, I think this is also included in your session 7. I'm sorry, 6. So in your week number 6, if you can go really quickly to your week number 6, there's a folder in here called contouring. If you click on that, you can actually then click on any of the images that are in here just to open them up. This is how a makeup artist would contour a face. This is exactly the kind of stuff that you can do with this tonal retouching large and small. So you'll see that because you want a forehead to protrude out, that would be a lighter area. Then you want this part of your face to recede, so that's pushed back. You guys have all of these images on your in your folder here. The same thing, a little bit lighter on the bridge of the nose, a little bit darker on the sides to give the nose more dimension. Lighter underneath these panes of your face, but a little bit, again, I'm ignoring blush. That's more makeup, but contouring on the bottoms to get the face to recede. And you'll see there's several different versions of this in here, but they all look exactly the same. I mean, they all go after exactly the same. They'll all show you pretty much exactly the same thing. So, didn't need to open that. This will give you a whole nother cheat sheet of it. And yeah, that you probably don't need. Okay, questions about any of this? All right, and then the final thing that we need to talk about here is the stacking order that you do your retouching in. You'll notice that I put the pixel retouching down first, and the reason I did that is that because all of this tonal stuff, the pixel retouching will show through all of it. If, on the other hand, I move the pixel stuff up to the top, all this tonal stuff goes away. So the problem with that is that, yes, could I put a pixel layer on the top? I could, but I would have to bake all of my tonal work into that layer. In order to do this, in order to have a layer that's on top that includes the tonal work that I've done, I would have to select my top layer, hold down the Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E to actually make... What are you waiting for? Option shift. Sorry, computer weirdness. I could now then start working. So I've just made a merged version of all of that onto the very top, and I could start doing this. The problem with that is though that all of my tonal work is baked into this file. There's no reason for that. I don't need that. What happens if I want to come back and do more tonal work? What happens if I want to do less tonal work? I've baked it all in here. So I don't want to do that. I'm going to get rid of this. What I'm going to always do is leave this. Virgin is at the bottom. Your pixel retouching is on top. Your tonal stuff goes on top of this. Color goes on top of that. Liquefying goes on top of that. and finally output sharpening. So those are the orders. Everybody write this down because this is going to come up. So I will wait. So the assumption is that you actually make a decent beginning version file, because the new version that's down the bottom, this was actually a film scan, so I don't have the raw data. But if I did, you know that this would be a smart object that had all the raw data in it. The problem with changing that once you start doing your retouching is that if I do some pixel retouching up here and then I change the version down here at the bottom, all of the retouching is invalid, because let's say I make my new version or the version that's down here that I started with, let's say I make it lighter, then all of my retouching is still got the darker version of it that's on top, and so it doesn't work. So anyway, you want to make sure that you're starting with the best thing that you can start with. Then your next is all your pixel retouching. So if you are going to do frequency separation, that would be pixel retouching. If you're going to do cutting and pasting on the hair, that is also pixel retouching. Clone stamp tool, healing brush tool, all of those are pixel retouching. They all happen underneath your tonal. Now, they don't all have to happen on this one layer. They can be, you can have multiple layers in here. I can keep working on this and then eventually create a frequency separation group, but the tonal stuff has to be on top of all of that. Then on top of the tonal work, you do color work, and this would be more color grading. It's not stuff that you want to do to your image initially. It's more, color grading has more to do with mood and how I'm going to present this and all of that kind of stuff. So split toning would be color grading. Making your images warmer or darker, all of that could be, because what you're hoping to do is that if it doesn't work, if you say you make it warmer and then you actually print it out and it's like, oh my God, this was way too warm, you don't have to go back in and redo the original version at the bottom, because again, if you change the original version at the bottom, all of the retouching, pixel retouching that you have done is invalid. So this color grading at the top would be more final, output color that you might change. You might say, okay, well, I'm really into warm shit this year, but next year you might be into really cold stuff. And this will allow you to change the color of your image without having to redo any of the tonal work or any of the pixel work. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay, then on top of your color work is where we would do liquefying. Liquefying is a destruction of your image. It's a distortion of your image. It's what we're going to look at today. But that act has to incorporate all of the stuff that you've done before. All of your retouching has to be done. All of your tonal work all of that has to be done before you actually do a liquefy. Your color, if it's grading and you're unsure about it, you can actually put the color on top of your liquefy. Those two might be able to go back and forth, because I don't want to really bury your liquefy or to bake that into your liquefy part of your image. But nonetheless, those possibly interchangeable. But then finally, the very last step that you would do would be output sharpening. And the reason that is the last step that you do is that your output sharpening changes depending on the destination. So if you're going to leave it on screen, it's one sharpening. If you're going to print it, it's a very different sharpening. If you're printing on matte paper, it's a very different sharpening than on glossy paper. If you're printing big, it's very different output setting, sharpening than if it's really small. If it's being viewed at a far distance, it's very different than it's being viewed close up. All of those sharpenings need to be tuned specifically to what you're really going to do with your image. And the idea for me is that I make master files that I can repurpose forever. So you could have 10 different sharpening layers at the end of all of this game. Make sense? Alrighty. Last thing we are going to do is the hair fix. So let's actually do that really quickly. I'm going to double click on the hand to kick back. We'll take a break as soon as we get through this. I'm going to come down to my pixel retouching layer. I'm going to hit the L key to grab a lasso tool, and I'm going to select every bit of hair that I can select, and also a big chunk of her skin, because I don't want to all of a sudden find that I need to move something and I didn't select enough of it. That's very frustrating if you actually do this stuff. So I've got a small spot in the very middle that hasn't been selected. If you hold down your Shift key, you can then select that to add to it, and then Command J, jump it to its own layer. So once I get to its own layer, we've talked about this before, to avoid repeating patterns, I'm going to transform this thing that I've actually done. I'm also going to go to my pasteboard right now because, again, a lot of times when you transform, your control handles end up outside of your image and you can't get to them unless you're on the pasteboard. So I'm going to hit the F key to get to the pasteboard. And then I'm going to click on this new hair patch layer thing that I'm going to do. Command T to transform it. The first thing I always do is rotate it. It's just what I always do. I'm going to stretch it out to make it longer so that I feel like I've got something that I can actually work with. And then I'm going to put a little bit of bend in here. We could do this later, but this was what I was talking about earlier. I feel like all this hair is like way too stick straight. So I'm going to put a little bit of bend in here to actually make it not seem, my patch not seem so stick straight. To do that, it's this little icon right up here at the very top that I always think it looks like a tennis net. You can also get to it by going to the edit menu down to free transform, and it's this warp tool right here. It's the same thing. So either pick this warp or click on this. You'll get a series of control handles in on your image part right here. If you hold on your option key and click on this, I think it might only show me this guy. Yeah, but then it doesn't show me the warp part here. So I'm going to undo that. Yeah, I'm going to turn my image back on. So that was a mistake. Sorry. Okay, so working on I'm back here. I haven't warped it yet or transformed it yet. Command T, rotate, stretch again, warp tool, and these control handles allow you to put bend in it. So I'm actually going to put bend in it so that it's more curvy. That's a little too tight right there. A little bit more, a little bit more. Just so that it's not so stick straight. And I feel like that's actually working pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. Click on the little check mark to do it. Then I'm just going to move this thing, hit the V key to get the move tool so that it's roughly around the area that I'm trying to actually get. So, and we'll see how this works. I'm going to put a black layer mask on this guy right now. So to put a black layer mask, if you hold down your option key and you click on the add layer mask, it'll give you a black one. If you can't remember that part, Command Z to undo that. Simply add a layer mask regularly like you normally would, and then invert the mask, Command I. You get to the same place. Hit the B key to get a brush. Make sure that you're working on a mask now. You'll notice that you no longer have your dodging and burning colors, but you've actually got black and white. And that's largely because it's I'm working on a mask. You cannot have color in a mask. You can only have shades of gray. I'm going to check my brush. I'm going to make sure that it's at least a 50% hard brush because I want a decent edge on this brush. I don't want to be mixing at the edges. I don't want to be mixing old texture and new texture. Normal blending mode, 100% opacity, and 100% flow. Drag that all the way up again. And then I'm simply going to paint across the area that needs the hair fix. So I'm going to start down here at the bottom of my brush, and I'm going to come all the way up. And then I'm going to come all the way back down again. So if we want to look at what my layer mask looks like, hold down your option key and click on just the layer mask. This is what it looks like. And you'll see I've got a small little bit down here that I didn't get. So I'm going to grab that guy. I may actually, depending on what happens, I may actually fill in the whole corner right here. But right now, I don't have any holes in my brush. I've only got a slight shift of opacity as I'm starting to go from white to black. So this mask is in the right place. But when I turn my image on, you'll notice that the hair patch is awful because I've got her eyeball in here, all of that. So you don't want to move the mask. You simply want to move the pixel stuff that's underneath it and maybe transform it again. Maybe who knows what you're going to do. So to move the pixel part but not the mask, you need to click on the chain link right between the two. If you actually try to move everything right now, you not only will move the pixel part, but you'll move the mask. And that's not what I want to do. The mask is actually in the right spot. So I'm going to click on this little chain link between the two to break that. I'm going to then click on my pixel content. And now with the V key, hit the V key, I can move this all around. And I can continue to transform it. I can continue to do all sorts of other things to it as well. So in this case, I'm going to actually pull it down here. I need to get rid of all of that part. I can transform this again. Now, because the chain link is broken between these two, when I actually do the transform on the hair, it will not change. It will not transform the mask. So again, make sure that you got your little brackets around the pixel part. Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. First thing I'm going to do is stretch this out to make it longer, then rotate it a little bit, then drop it down in here. And that's beginning to look pretty good for me right here. So I sort of like this part. I'm going to go ahead and click on the check mark and say OK. And then this has done a pretty good job. I've still got a hole that's down in here, and I've got a little bit of one that's up in here. But you can see, even though it's made from the same piece of hair that's right next to it, because I've transformed this, it does not look like the exact same thing. I haven't cloned the exact same thing. So I'm going to merge this down into my pixel content. The way you do that is Command E, and it just brings all of that work, mask and everything down, and then you do it all over again. Command L to bring up the lasso dialog box. Circle the whole thing of hair. Command J, it brings it to its own layer. Command T, rotate it, stretch it, make it bigger. Throw a little warp into it so it's just not so perfect. Move it to where you, well, I'm just going to go ahead and say OK to that. Again, same process. I'm going to do Command, hold down my Option key, add a layer mask. This is the area right in here I need to fix. So the B key to get a brush. But again, if you're going to fix this area right here, you can't just start in the middle of this girl's hair. You've got to start a line up at the very top and come all the way down through this. You can get it wider at the bottom, but this is what my mask looks like now. I don't have holes in here. I've got a little bit of weird edge right there that I would actually smooth out, and a little bit of one right there that I would do the same. And then back to the same trick again. Break the link between my mask and the pixel content. Hit the V key to move this stuff around, and you can see I'm doing a very slight, subtle movement. Oh, I'm actually moving my mask. Command Z. Go back to your pixel part, V key, and now you can actually move this into place. And again, I like the way this is beginning to look. I still feel like it needs a little bit more bend in it. It's kind of in the right spot. So again, I'm just going to Command T, bring up the warp tool, and actually just try to put a little bit more bend in this. Maybe a little less bend in that. Maybe a little more bend in this part in here. Pull this out and say OK. And then again, drop it down, Command E. Questions about this? Yes, Dosh. I'm just doing the same process over and over. So did you get the first round done? Okay, so this is a gigantic brush. That's not going to actually work for you. So let's go back in history before you do all that. Just go back to add layer mask. You need to hit the cancel out here because it wants to do the transform. Go back to add layer mask. Okay, and this is perfect right here. So use your brush tool, B key, and white is your foreground color, and just do a big line right down here. Just for the, where it start with just the part that's where you're trying to fill in. Yeah, perfect. It may not need it over there, but that's okay. Hold down your Option key and click on the layer mask. And you can see you need to continue this all the way up. It's got to go, so you can work right here on the layer mask. Just hit the B key again, and then just drag it all the way up to the very top. Perfect. And so that's the beginning of this. So you can turn everybody else back on. Okay, so this is in the right place, but not your pixel part. The pixel part is not. So click on the link between the two, that little link in the middle. Right now, click on your pixel content, hit the B key, and you can move it around. So just start to move it around. You'll see it happen. And you can actually, you don't just have to do the V key. You can do the, you can transform this. So hit Command T instead, and now you can rotate this. You can stretch it. You can make it all sorts of things. But you're not changing where it's actually going down. So yeah, that's exactly what you want to do. Make sense? And then again, you just do it over and over and over and over again. But this way, I don't have hair that's starting in the middle of nowhere and going to nowhere. Is everybody good on this part? Is this making sense? Questions about this? Okay, guys, I got, let's call this 220, make it a hard 10, be back at 230. So we're moving on to, again, I'm playing a little bit of catch up for some of the things that we've missed earlier. So there's a couple of things, or first off, are there any other questions about doing this tonal retouching, why, how it works, the order that this is going in, where the pixel retouching part happens? Are we all feeling good about this? Yes.
So it goes liquefying, color grading, tonal, pixel retouching, and then the last step is sharpening.
So no.
No?
No. So at the very bottom is your virgin copy, something you never touch.
Okay.
Above that is your pixel work. Anything. So frequency separation, this whole cut and paste hair thing that we're doing, clone stamp tool, healing brush tool, all the things that modify pixels. That all happens right above your virgin copy, the copy that you don't do anything to. On top of that, we go into tonal retouching. On top of that, I would do, I'm going to flip my order here. I would do liquefy on top of that, and then color grading at the end, because that way it allows you to change your color grading without having to redo all of your liquefy work. And then finally, output sharpening.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to hit the F key to get to the black pasteboard. F key one more time to get back to the stoplights that are at the very top and close this guy up. You don't need to save that. It's not part of your homework. I need to go back to our session number 6. In our session number 6, there is a folder. So again, I'm in session number 6. There's a folder called Skin Correction by the Numbers. I want everybody to open that folder up, and inside is a slightly risque photograph by Terry Richardson. If you know Terry Richardson, you won't be surprised at this work. It's called Sunburn Terry Richardson. It's a picture of a girl wearing either a bra or a bathing suit top, and she's got a wicked sunburn. I need you to open that up really quickly for me. So, how would you get rid of the sunburn? Anybody? Okay, well, this is how you do it. We are going to start with, again, like we always do, a copy of this. So, Command J. And in this case, I'm actually going to blur this image. What I want to do is, or at least this is how I'm going to attack this thing. There is sunburned skin in here, but there's also skin in here that is not sunburned. So the goal in this is that if I can make the sunburned skin the same color and tone as the area that is not sunburned, won't I get rid of the sunburn? Right? So that's actually what I'm going to do. So to do this, we're going to lay down 2 color points. So this is somewhat similar to when we are doing our using channels to, building a channel into a copy of a channel into a mask. This is somewhat similar to that kind of process. We're going to start and lay down color points. So come over to your tool palette on the left-hand side. It's the eyedropper tool, but we don't want the eyedropper tool itself. We want the one right underneath it, the color sampler tool. And the thing is that what you want to do is you want to put your first sample point where the problem is. So if we zoom in to this sunburned area right here, you'll see that there's some blotchiness in this. There are areas in here that are not as badly sunburned as others. You need to worry about, we've only got a 3 pixel by 3 pixel square spot that we're going to put down. And if I hit the wrong point here, it isn't going to work for me. So the reason I've made this second layer right now is I'm going to blur it. So if you come up to, so make sure your second layer is selected, come up to your filter menu and come down to blur, down to Gaussian blur, and I'm going to hit this with like a 3 pixel blur, something like that. Yeah, that sort of like evens everything else out, and I'm going to say okay. Now, if you see, for instance, image in a magazine and you love the color of that in a magazine, you can scan that picture of the magazine. Now, if I scan it, I would scan it with a color card put in next to it so that I can white balance it. and color correct it. But then I would have a scan in here in my image that I could actually measure the color legitimately of and then try to reproduce that color. The problem with a magazine, though, is a magazine is made with halftone dots. So it is discrete amounts of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. But if you zoom in on a magazine that's been printed, you'll actually see the halftone dots. You cannot do a color measurement with those. So you do this very same trick. You blur it and you will get just a color without the halftone structure to it, and then you can actually get a legitimate color point. So what I'm going to do here is, you can see, or at least on my case, there's some really blotchiness still in here. What you want to find is the point that is the absolute worst off. So the most sunburned part. And for me, it's like right in this area right in here is where I'm going to put down my first color sampler point. So I'm simply going to drop a point down there, and you can see I get a number 1 in my info palette that's giving me a readout. And then I'm going to zoom back out, and I'm going to look for a place that is the skin tone I want this to be. Now, obviously, the part where she has no tan at all is way too light. I don't want that to be the part. The thing about her arms, though, is you need to worry. You need to think this out in your mind. If she's this sunburned on her chest, there's a good chance she's pretty sunburned on her arms as well. It doesn't look as bad, but I still would worry about this. Her stomach, though, the area that's right underneath this, does not seem to have that problem. So that's where I'm going to put my second point. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that her body has got dimension. So as I start to move here to the side, it's going to start getting darker because it is moving into shadow, the shadows of the side of her body. I don't want that. So I'm going to pick a spot that is literally right underneath the area on the top of her body, and I'm going to click on that part right there, and that is going to be my destination color. So if you take a look at that, you can see that it is reading 236, 197, 182. So what I want to do is, I want the problem numbers. My number 1, I want those numbers to match the number 2s. Does that make sense? Who am I losing here? I've got bad color and I've got good color. I know what both of those numbers are. If I can get the bad color to be the same as the good color, I've won. Make sense? All right. So you'll notice right now with our numbers up here, I've got 2 points, but I've just got one set of numbers within each point. I'm going to add a curve on top of this. So come up down to your layers palette. At the bottom of your layers palette, it's the circle that's half black and half white. Click on that and come up, and we're just going to add a regular curve to this. And the minute we add that curve, your sets of numbers get split, and you get 2 sets of numbers now. So there's an original set on the left-hand side, there's a forward slash, and then there's the after set. So what this shows you is the befores and afters. Now, our numbers are exactly the same because we haven't done anything with the curve yet. But the minute you do something with a curve, like I'm just going to drag the middle and pull it down, you will see that the first sets of numbers on the left remain exactly the same. The numbers on the right are the ones that actually change. So I'm going to tear that point off because that's not what I want to do here. So I'm going to do this step by step. So your first move says, everybody have this curve on here in 2 points. Yes?
I was just gonna say, how did you get to the curve?
So I just clicked on add a curve at the very bottom. So the icon on the very bottom of your layers palette, that's the circle, half black and half white. Click on that, you'll get a flyout menu and just add a curve, pick curve. Yes?
Does it matter if you go like up or down to get to the number? Because I remember following along with this video
Yeah.
for the homework
Yeah.
that we just turned in, and you were going, I believe, like I can't remember if it was up or down, but I had to go the opposite way of you to get to the correct number.
As long as the numbers are the correct numbers, that's all that matters. Maya, did that work for you? Are you good? Okay. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is, you can't do this universally. So the channel that's sitting, or what you're adjusting here when the curve opens up, is all of RGB. It's everything all put together. We need to do this channel by channel. So if you click on this drop-down menu, you can come down to just the red channel. And then I use the targeting adjustment tool. It's the little hand with the arrows pointing up and down right next to the channel we just picked. Click on that, and then you're going to come over and right on this point number 1. This is where we need to start. So if you just take a look at my screen really quickly, my goal in this is that again, point number 1, this point number 1, these are the bad numbers. So this 242, 170, and 164, that's what I need to change. These numbers that are on the right side of the point number 2 are the good numbers. So what I need to do is get these numbers here, the 3 that are right here, to match the 3 that are right here. That's why you start with the bad one first and then add the good one. It puts them right in the center next to each other. Now you can do it the other way, but it just gets more complicated because your numbers are not right next to one another. So I need this 242 to be 236. Using the targeting adjustment tool, click right on the number 1 and drag down, and I'm watching my number 1 R channel. This number 1 now reads 236, which is exactly the same as the 236 of the good color. Did that work for everyone?
You said drag it down?
It's either down or up when you just start doing it. All you're trying to do is get this number right here to be the same as the number that's right next to it. Did it work?
You're trying to get the number on the first color sample?
I'm trying to get this number right here to equal that number. Because again, these are the bad numbers right here. So, and these are the good ones right here. So mine, again, yours might be a slightly different number. It should be close. Got it? Okay. So that's the red channel. We need to do the same thing for the green and the blue channel one at a time. So I'm going to click on my drop-down menu, go to my green channel, hover over that number again. Now my green in the bad number is 170. In the good number, it's 197. That means I'm going in the other direction. I've got to go, I need more green. So I'm going to click and push up till I get a 197. So again, now my green number right here, the bad number is 196. 197 is what the one is on the other one. So I'm going to actually pop it up just slightly more. Okay, so my green value, it says 197, which is exactly the same as I want over here on my good color. And then on the last one, I'm going to go down to the blue channel now. And in the blue channel, I've got a 164 here, and it needs to be a 182. So that also is going to get pushed up. So click your targeting adjustment tool right in the middle of the point. Click and push up. And again, I'm looking for that 164 to be a 182. All right, so in my case right now, this is what I've got. The good numbers that are over here that have not changed, the 236, 197, 182, I've now used a curve that has made the bad numbers, this 242, 171, the same as the good numbers right here. So this row right here, 236 is 236, 197 is 197, 182 is 182. I now have this area right here that's under that number 1 is the same color as this area was down here without this curve. Make sense? We good on this part? Okay. So then the final thing in all of this is that you need to invert this layer mask. So click on your curve layer mask. You can either, once you click on it, you can come up to your properties panel and click on invert, or just hit Command I, or you can fill it with black, and no matter how you want to do it, make it black. I'm also going to get rid of this second layer, the blurred layer on here. I don't want to keep that anymore. I can lose that part. I can throw it away. I don't need a second copy of my virgin layer here right now because I'm just doing this color on top of it. That's all I'm doing here. So then finally, I am going to still work on my tablet. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to make it a completely soft brush because this is changing color and tone now. The blending mode of this brush is going to be normal, 100% opacity, and then take your flow way down. Bring your flow down to like 3 or 4 or 5%, somewhere in there. I'm going to start out with 4% on mine. So then working on this image now with a low flow allows me to scrub across all of this. White is my foreground color. I want to make sure it is white, so I'm going to hit the D key just to make sure it is. It is. And then I'm simply going to start scrubbing on this area of sunburn and move fast. Do not stay in one place too long or you'll overshoot it. She has a slight sunburn on the top of her chest that's not as bad. This will correct for that as well. And then you can continue to work on this area that's actually down in here. She has burn marks you can see under the lace. You need to actually get those parts out as well. She's also got sunburn on the top of her shoulders. You can get rid of that part as well. So this is actually hitting in pretty good for me. If you want to see what your mask actually looks like, there's an area right there that needs it. Hold down your Option key and click on the mask. This is what mine looks like. The areas that are lighter are allowing a much stronger correction. The areas that are darker are much less. Looking at how strong this is right now, I probably would, if I was going to do this again, drop my flow even more. I would take it down to like a 2 to really be able to bring this in a little bit slower. But right now, I think that this is relatively good, and you turn this on and off, and that looks pretty damn good. Now, if you said to yourself, well, yeah, that's pretty good here, but they're not really the same in terms of how light or dark they are. If you felt like this area that's sunburn is still a little bit too darker, how would you fix that? What? No, that would just return the red. I'm talking about tone now. The way you would fix this, everybody do this with me. Come over to your layers palette at the very bottom, the icon that's got the little square with the plus in the middle. Hold down your Option key and click on this. It'll open up this dialog. You want to put in here Tonal Retouch Large. Click on your drop-down menu to change the mode to soft light, and then click on the fill with neutral color and say OK. I only need to make this area lighter. I don't need to make, well, I can actually make a darkening color. If you wanted to bring down the tan line on her chest, you could make that a burning color for that. But I'm going to simply click on my foreground color. I'm going to sample a color of her, probably the same area that's got the good color on it, to get her skin tone. Again, this is going to be my dodging color. So I've clicked on her skin tone. I'm going to click on brightness, and it is already up at a 94. That's fine. I'm going to grab my saturation and pull it down till it's closer to sort of like the teens, somewhere in there. I'm going to say OK to that. I'm not going to bother to build a burning color right now. I'm just going to use this one. Again, my tonal retouching large. The B key to get a brush. Make sure that it is a completely soft brush. Mine is. Normal blending mode. Change your opacity down to like 2 or 3%. Bring your flow all the way back up. And then with a relatively large brush, just start tapping. And if you want to see the difference, do a history snapshot. So come over to your history screen, click on the little camera at the bottom. It'll create a snapshot, go up to the very top, and then go back to the original one at the very top and where you're at right now. And you did that in 20 minutes. Questions about this? We good? All right, you can close this guy up. Okay, so for the next part here, I can't record this part because, okay. So if you take a look in your session 8 folders, there is a folder, there should be a folder called Liquify New Files. Can everybody find that part? And inside that new files, there's a folder called big hair JPEG. If you could open that into Photoshop. Everybody have this guy open? Anybody? So it's in session 8. There's a folder in there called Liquify New Files. It's in there. It's called Big Hair JPEG. Okay, so we're not going to be doing radical modification on this. I just want to be able to demonstrate the tools, and it's easier to see this on a figure that is familiar. I tried to do this with mountain scenes before, and it just doesn't really give the idea of what the tools do. So that's why I'm starting with this, but we're also going to try and tame our hair down just a little bit. But anyway, so first thing we do is we make a copy of this, Command J. And the second thing we do is we actually convert this to a smart object. Liquify is a transform. So like all the stuff that we've been talking about before, if you transform a smart object, it is non-destructive. If you do liquify on a regular layer, it's baked into it. You can't undo it. But if you do it on a smart object, then it remains editable for the rest of all eternity, or as long as your file is around. So to make this into a smart object, up to the layer menu, down to smart object, over to convert to smart object. And you should have a little square that shows up in the lower right-hand corner of your image, indicating that, yes, indeed, this is a smart object. So then to liquify this thing, you come up to the filter menu, down to liquify. And this will bring you into a completely new space. I actually double click on the area up at the top to make my space as large as I can. Your controls, most of your controls in Photoshop work the same here as they do in Photoshop. So if you want to zoom in on your image, you can use the spacebar command to actually temporarily get the magnifying tool, and you can zoom in on this. And I'm just going to zoom in one click. That makes it 200%. It's a relatively small file. Hang on one second. I'm trying to find something else really quickly. Give me just 1 second. Yeah. Okay. So we are now in a completely different space. This is this is kind of like the select and mask workspace. We're not in Photoshop anymore. You can see we've got a completely different set of tools on one side. We've got properties that are actually on the other side, but it doesn't really look like the normal thing that we've actually been working with. So I want to use this image to work us through the tools and to sort of explain what goes on and the best way to use things here in the Liquify space. So we're going to start on the left-hand side up at the very top. And if you select the tool, if you hover over the tool at the very top, it looks like a finger that's pointing. This is the forward warp tool. If you click on that, what you will see over in your properties panel are the options for this tool. Now, if you click on the tool right underneath it, you will actually see that your brush properties change, although mine didn't. So let me go back. Yeah. If you go back and forth between the two of them, you'll see that your brush tool options change. It's important to remember that every single tool in here has its own set of tool options. Some of them don't appear in other tools. Some you get all 4 tools, some you don't. Some are controlled other way. All of them will have their own settings. So don't imagine that if you've got a setting that you like the brush size for one tool and you go to another one, it's going to inherit it. It won't. So we're going to start with the tool at the very top, and then we're going to look at our brush settings over here. Size is a pretty easy one. That's the very first one that you can change the size of. However, the bracket keys still work here in the Liquify tool, so I simply use the bracket keys to make my tool a little bit bigger. And I'm going to ask you to make your tool, if you take a look at my screen, about this is about the size of a nickel on this picture, something about that size so that you can really see sort of what's going on. Unfortunately, this tool has been in Photoshop for years. They've never bothered to go in and change these labels, but it's important that you know what these labels are. So density is hardness. It's the hardness of your brush. And to see what I mean, if you come down almost to 2/3 of the way down, a little bit more than halfway down, there's a tool that looks a little bit like a brush. Click on that tool really quickly. Make your brush much larger. So again, I'm using my bracket keys to make it much larger. And then over on your properties panel, you need to actually have it. See where it says show mask? It's really much in the middle of your properties. You need to have that checked so that you can see what this brush actually does. Then I'm going to set my density to 100%, and I'm going to come over and I'm going to hit a spot. Tap a spot right on the middle of her face. And you can see it's a relatively hard brush. If you then say Command Z to undo that and drag your density all the way down and do the same thing, you'll see that you get a very soft brush. So one is a really hard edge, one is a really soft edge. They should call this hardness, but they don't. Don't ask me why. If you've done this, hit Command Z to undo that and go back up to the forward warp tool, the tool at the very top. So the normal place most people start with these tools is with a density of 50%, something not too hard, not too soft. Then we are actually going to use the tool to see what it actually does. I'm going to uncheck pin edges over on the side of mine so you can see what that does as well. But now I want you to take the tool, and we're going to start on this area that's sort of the darker area in the top left-hand side of your image. I want you to click and drag through her face. This is what the tool does. It pushes things in the direction that you're actually doing it in. Now you can see that the brush has actually had a fall off. So if you take a look at this brush, you can see when I went through her hair, it doesn't distort all of her hair near the edges. That's because my density is not at 100%. If you hit Command Z to undo that and drag your density all the way up and do it again, you will see that the effect goes much further out than just the center of your brush. So Command Z to undo that. I'm going to take my density back to 50%. Pressure controls how extreme this happens in time. So if you take your pressure all the way down and do the same move again, you'll see that nothing happens to her. If you bring the pressure up to 50% and do the same thing, it does partially to her, but it's not as extreme. Command Z to undo that. Take your pressure all the way up. And then you'll see it's at its most extreme here. So what this allows you to do is control how radical the impact of this tool actually is. And what you'll find that in Liquify, unless you're trying to make cartoon distortions like this, that you want to do everything in the slowest steps that you can do it in. You want to do incredibly small adjustments over a period of time. So pressure really helps you do that kind of stuff. I don't know anybody who works at a pressure of 100%. Command Z to undo that. So I'm going to set it also at 50%. Then in terms of rate, if you take rate and try to make it slide up, you'll see that you get no rate. Rate is not a tool that is not an option that applies to this tool. It will apply to other tools, and we'll look at what rate does in other tools. But the last thing is this pin edges. If you don't have pin edges, come over to the very edge of your image, click and drag across, and you will see that it starts to pull your image away from the background. You'll see that you end up seeing these the little checkerboard that's back underneath it. This is what pin edging is all about. You typically do not want this to happen. So if you hit Command Z to undo it and then click on pin your edges and do the same move again, you will see that it pulls it in, but you do not get transparency behind it. The white that we're seeing on here is literally this white border. It's not some white paper behind this image. It's actually part of the image. So Command Z to undo that part. So I am going to leave pin edges on. You can also use stylus pressure for this if you're doing this with a tablet. I strongly suggest when you first start working in Liquify, you do not use stylus pressure in here. It'll all get just way too confusing. Now, while we're in here, as the next option that we have going down, I'm going to stick in properties here for just a second. You can click on this open face aware liquify, and you will see inside of here there's only a single face that is selected. We can actually cancel out of this really quickly just so that I can show you how this thing works. Leave it open, don't close this one up, but I need you to open a second file from that student 8 folders. It's not inside the new liquify file, it's the one right under it, the one that says Twin Sisters. If you can actually open Twin Sisters up in Photoshop really quickly. And in Photoshop, if you don't just go into Photoshop's workspace, like you can see in my workspace, I can still see a bunch of my Finder and all that. To eliminate that part, come up to the Photoshop menu down to Hide Others, and that'll all go away. We're going to do the same thing with this image right here, this picture of the twins. I'm going to duplicate this layer, Command J. I'm going to turn it into a smart object, layer, down to smart objects, convert to smart object, and then into liquify, filter, liquify. And we've come into the same space that we were in before. However, now I'm not going to use the push to the left tool. I want to look at just the properties under the face liquify, face aware. So face aware liquify. If you open that up, you will now see that you've got a face number 1 at the top. But if you scroll down, oh, I take that back. You don't scroll down. If you click on this drop-down menu, you will get a face number 2. And that tells you that Photoshop understands that there are 2 faces in here. You cannot do them at the same time, but you actually can do them. You do them separately. I'm going to go back to my face number 1. Typically, it's the one that's on the left, but we'll find out right now. In this space right here, you can control the size of the eyes, the height of the eyes. You can play with these tools all you want. So let's just start with size. I'm going to click on the one that represents the left eye, and I'm going to make it bigger. And you see that the left eye on person number 1 just got bigger. If you drag it in the opposite direction, there is negative in this. You can actually make it smaller. If you want both eyes to increase or decrease at the same rate, you click on the lock between the 2. And now when you move one slider, it'll move both of them. And you can see you can make her eyes bigger or smaller. I'm going to zero this back out. We're going to go down to eye height now, and you can do the same thing. I'm just going to stick with her left eye. So it's only making her eye larger in terms of its height, not its width. If you go to the next tool underneath it, the eye width, and you click on that, you can actually make her eyes wider or more narrow. If you come to the eye tilt, you can actually rotate her eye in or rotate it back up. So again, just the angle of the eye. If you then come to the eye distance underneath it, you can make her eyes wider apart or more narrow together. And I got to be honest with you guys, this is really hard to do in Photoshop if you're doing it manually. You can do a lot of cutting and pasting to do this, but this is a challenge. It works better here. Again, clearly, if you take these to the extremes, your characters start to, your people start to look like cartoon characters. We can go to the next one down, the nose height. If you do that, you'll see it makes the entire nose shorter or longer. You can do nose width. You can make it broader or more narrow. Smile is debatable how well this works, but if you come down to smile and click and make it more positive, it pulls the edges of her mouth up a little bit. If you come in the other direction, it brings them down a little bit. I always find this is one of the hardest tools to actually get to be believable. The upper lip will actually increase the size of her upper lip or decrease it, making it thinner or heavier or thicker. The lower lip you can do the same thing with. The mouth width, you can actually make her mouth wider or more narrow. The mouth height, you can actually raise it up, which actually makes both her lips more plump. The face shape, so now we're going into the face shape. You can actually lift her forehead up or make it more compressed, not as high. The chin height, you can lift it up or pull it down. The jawline, you can actually make her like a more square jaw or a more triangular jaw. And then finally, the entire face width. You can actually make the whole thing wider or more narrow. So this is basically the tools that you use to actually manipulate faces. That doesn't mean you can't use the tool set on the other side to do these. You can. So for that, I'm going to hit cancel out of this, and we're going to go back to the other image, the one that's the big hair. Again, make sure that you've got the smart object on the top selected, up to the filter menu, down to liquify. And again, I'm going to use my keyboard shortcut spacebar command to actually get it to zoom open. So we've sort of gone over a little bit. You can collapse the liquify properties panel right now because we're not going to. We could use it on this person, but we're not gonna. We're going to explore the other tools. So I'm going to do the distortion again. I'm going to pick the very top tool, the push to the move to the left. It's not the move to left tool. It is the push forward tool. If you hover over it, the forward warp tool. I'm going to do some pretty radical stuff here. I'm going to like whack through her face. I'm going to distort a whole lot of her body. I'm just going to run through a couple of these really fast. Now, once you get to this part, if you want to actually undo everything, you don't like anything that's gone on here, you come over to your properties panel, and down at the very bottom, there's a thing that says restore all. If you click on that, it will undo all the distortions that you actually made. If you go back to your image again and do the same sort of distortion parts again, so really try to make it a little, just so that there's obviously stuff that we can work at, you have got the reconstruct tool next to the restore all. If you click on the reconstruct tool, it opens up a dialog box for you and says, well, you don't need to go all the way back. You can actually pick. At 100%, it is actually all distorted. At 0%, it's completely back to where it was before we liquefied it. 50% is somewhere in the middle. So this lets you control, but remember, this controls all of your liquefying. This is not specific. So I'm going to leave this up at 100% and hit cancel because I want to do reconstruction in a different way. If you look at your next tool down, this is the reconstruct tool. So select it. With the reconstruct tool selected, I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. You can now be more selective about the areas that you want to bring back to more normal, I'm going to use the word normal. That's not a fair term. I'm going to use the unliquefied version. But just give me a break and don't hammer on me too hard about saying, well, that's not normal. There's nothing about that. This is normal, right? Just returning it to the way it was before we liquefied it. So this also has tool settings for it. So again, size is independent. This has got nothing to do with the size that we were doing for the forward warp tool. It does have density as well. I'm going to bring my density down to 50% on mine. Again, that's the hardness or the softness of your brush. Pressure, again, is how extreme this brush works. But now we have rate. So I'm going to leave rate all the way up at 100%, and I'm going to actually then start to paint through her hair. And you can see as I'm painting through her hair or back into her face, whatever, I can selectively restore areas here that again that the way they looked before they were liquefied. Now I've still got stuff that has not been restored here. To see what the difference is, if you look at the very bottom of your properties panel, there's a preview check mark down here. If you undo your preview on and off, this shows you what you still have modified. So this is a quick way to see that part. And again, you can make your judgments based on that part here. If we take our rate and pull the rate all the way down and you try to do the same thing, you will actually see, because my pressure is still up, but if I just click and hover over something, I don't get any movement in here. I have to sort of like jiggle it a little bit to get any sort of movement. Rate is causing how fast that whole thing actually happens in all of this part. Pressure is still how extreme this tool works. So if I build my pressure up and then start to paint across, stuff will actually go back really quite quick on you. So it'll take off. It works much faster. So all this is doing is controlling how fast you do your restore part. Yes? Okay. The next tool down, I'm going to go to the forward warp tool first to show you how the next tool down works. So grab the very top tool, the forward warp tool. I'm going to make my brush considerably smaller, and I'm going to come in here right to her back, the edge of the back of her sweater right here. I just want to create a problem that I can then fix using the third tool down. So if you come in on her back right here, and I want you to do just little taps in here to make her back really lumpy. So I've got a bunch of lumps in here. Actually, I'm going to restore all of that. I'm going to make my tool a little bit smaller, and I make the brush completely hard. I want this to look really lumpy and distorted. So smaller tool, and then just do a series of little knocks in here, almost so it looks like she's I don't know, got a scalloped back. So the next tool down, which is the third one, not the restore one, but the one underneath it, is the smooth tool. If you click on the smooth tool, it also has all its own set of settings on it. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. My density, I'm going to leave at 50%. My pressure, I'm going to leave at 50. And my rate, I'm going to leave at 50 as well. You're good. Okay, so with this really scalloped background that I've got going on here, the third tool down, which is the smooth tool, I typically will keep this at a really soft, so 50%, possibly even more. So I'm going to bring it all down to 0, make a really soft brush, and then only let the edge of your brush touch this scallop part. But now when you click and you drag down this or across this guy, actually that's not doing anything. I'm going to bring my density back to 50%. And then come down here. And you can see what it does is it tries to, like those little peaks that exist, it tries to knock them off. It just tries to round them off. It's sort of more like you're trying to smooth over things. So ultimately, if you use this tool to its final possible degree, it's like the reconstruct tool. It'll bring your image back to what it normally was before. But this is a great way to go in if you're feeling like stuff is a little bit too choppy, to go in and just sort of round that off. And you can see if we continue to work on here, it's not completely reconstructed. This is what a complete reconstruction would be, but it moves it back in that direction. It just does it in a slower method. If we then come to the next tool down, this is the twirl tool. And I'm going to ask you to make this about the size of this girl's face. And then I'm also going to ask you to actually start right on her nose, the center of her nose. Over on your tool options on this one, I've got a tool size of 300. That's about the size of her face, a little bit bigger. Density 50, you can leave that here. Pressure, again, is how quickly this is going to happen, or how aggressively this is going to happen. Rate is how fast. So we come over and hold this right on her nose and click and just hold down. It continues to work. You don't have to move your brush at all. If you hit Command Z to undo that, to slow that process down, you would pull your pressure down. So bring your pressure down to like 25 and then do the same move. Click and you can see you still don't have to move, but it slows the whole thing down. Command Z to undo that. If you want it to go slower in its rotation, then you click the rate and pull it down. So if you pull your rate down to like 25 or 20 or 25, click and hold, you will see it takes forever for this. It's barely moving. I'm going to bump mine up to like 50, 42, something like that. Click and hold. You'll see it still is moving, but it's incredibly slow. Again, the problem with these tools is that they can be too aggressive and too fast. So all of these things, pressure and rate, help you slow this down. You don't want to be so slow like I am right now that this barely creeps along, but you want to have this thing under control. Otherwise, it's just going to take off on you, and it won't matter what you try to do. It's going to be horrible. Click Restore All if you've done that. The next tool down is the Pucker tool. So with the Pucker tool, again, I'm going to make this about the size of her face. Again, I have the very same controls here. I've got size, density, pressure now doesn't exist here, but rate does. So if you then hold this right, again, the center point right on her nose and click and hold it, it pulls her face. It's like puckering in. A lot of people call this pin cushioning. So if anybody in here sews and you have a pin cushion, it's a sort of like a small object that you can put pins into to keep them from rolling around. If you think about pushing a pin on that cushion, that is the sort of what they're trying to say happens right here. If you do not change anything, we're going to keep the very same tool, but can keep it over her nose. If you hold down the Option key, you get the opposite behavior. You get the bloat tool. So this will actually push it in the opposite direction. Right underneath the Pucker tool is the bloat tool. It's the same thing. If you hit Restore All, it's not the same thing, it's the opposite. Restore All. Click on the bloat tool. If you hold that down, again, making it the size of her face, it bloats her face out. If you hold down the Option key, you get the Pucker tool. It pulls the face in. So, Restore All. The next tool down is the Push to the Left tool. So if you select that, what the Push to the Left tool does, and where I'm going to do this right next to her face. So I'm going to do a brush, make my brush a little bit smaller. I'm going to leave the density at 100%. I'm going to bring the pressure all the way up and leave the rate. This doesn't have a rate. So I'm going to start with the edge of the brush right on the left side of her, on the right side of her face, and I'm going to click and drag up. And you see it pushes pixels to the left. If you go on the other side of her face and click and pull down, that pushes things to the right. If you then click underneath her eyes, starting on the left side and go to the right, it pushes things up. If you then go on the top of her hair and click on the right side and go left, it pushes things down. So you can push things in any direction depending on whether you want it to go left to right, up or down. Now, people get really good with this tool. This, in terms of actually trying to shape a lot of stuff, but it takes time. So this is an pretty advanced tool. I'm not saying this is necessarily your best friend starting out here, but I'm going to click on Restore All. To show you what I mean about that, I'm going to start down here next to her body and just say, I want to narrow this part down. So I'm going to start over here close. I'm going to bring my pressure down so it's not so aggressive to like 50%. I'm going to bring my density down also to 50%. Close enough. And then I'm going to start on this side of next to her, her back right here, and I'm just going to click and pull up a little bit. And you can see it allows me to reform the shape of that. I can also do the same thing on that little hump that's right there on her back, and it just pushes things in but gives me still a nice smooth line. I'm not trying to do that with the push forward tool, the warp tool. If I tried to do this with the warp tool, sorry, I didn't mean to say okay to that. If I tried to do the same thing with the forward warp tool, you'll see that it gets really tricky. You've got to use a really big brush to do this, and you start to push in and it's not really smooth, and then you got to use a smooth tool. Anyway, that's what that tool is about. I'm going to hit Restore All again. The next tool down is the Freeze tool. So if you click on the Freeze tool, You need to make sure that your show mask is on. So this is a freezing mask. This isn't like a mask we use in Photoshop. This is a freezing mask. And to see what this does, if again, it's got its own density to it. So I'm going to grab the density and I'm going to bring it up to 50%. Pressure is fine at roughly 50. I'm going to just paint over her face. And you'll see when I paint over her face, this thing turns red. If you do not have your show mask on, you can't see it, but it's still going to be an effect. It's still going to be working. If you click on the show mask, if you are working on something that's red, you will never be able to see the mask. So there's a drop-down menu that allows you to change color. So you could make it blue if you're working on a red. It doesn't change anything except your ability to actually see this guy. I'm going to leave mine as red. But what this tool does is it actually prevents any liquefy from happening where this is. So if we grab our our forward warp tool, if we grab this guy, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Just take her hair and you can see if you come in and you start to hit it against her here, that anything that is not frozen can actually be liquefied. But where her face is, that is not being liquefied at all. So again, that's how this whole tool ultimately works. If you turn your show mask back on, you can actually get rid of this mask now. It will not undo your liquefying. Your liquefying will still stay in place. To get rid of this mask, it is the mask options in the property part. You want to click on none, and the mask will go away, and now you actually can go ahead and liquefy the part that once was frozen. So I'm going to do a reconstruct or restore all. Let's say that her face is the only thing that you want to liquefy. You want to freeze everything else. Well, you could grab the freeze tool and you could come in here and you could try to paint everything else, but that takes way too long. Command Z to undo that. Instead, what you would do is under your mask options, you would click on mask all. That will then mask everything, and then you go to the next tool down, which is the thaw tool. So the thaw tool, again, it has all its own settings. So I'm going to make my brush much smaller. Leave it at 50% opacity. I'm going to pull my pressure down to 50% as well. And then I can actually paint her face open like this. And now the only thing that isn't frozen is her face. So I can turn off show mask again so I can really see what I'm doing. Forward warp tool, and it will distort her face, but it will not distort any of the hair that's on the outside or any of the rest of my image. Restore all. The last tool down is, again, if you click on it, it opens up your face aware. That's all this is about. And then there is a hand that allows you to move around. And then there's also a magnifying glass. So that's basically the way everything in here works. I'm going to click, if you click OK, it doesn't matter. It is a smart filter, so you can see here in Photoshop, I came back into it. If you double click on liquefy again, you can come right back into it and you can pick your work up from where you left off. So I'm going to do a restore all to make sure that there's nothing going on here. And all I'm going to do is to try to thin out how big her hair is on this right-hand side. So to do that, I don't want to distort her hands at all. So the very first thing I'm going to do is freeze her hands. So I'm going to click on the freeze tool. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. I'm going to make it relatively hard. I don't want a soft brush, so I'm going to bring it up around the 80s because I want to be able to outline her hand pretty well. And if you click and your mask is not showing, you will get this warning saying, you can't see this thing, but you're painting it. So I'm going to say, oh, okay, fine. Thank you for reminding me. Turn on show mask, and you can see it's already started right here. So I'm going to just paint through this part in right here. And that's all I'm really going to do. If I was worried about distorting her face, I also might do a line that comes right down here along her face, probably into her body like this, just so that I'm only playing with this area of her hair. I don't want to play with anything else. And if I want to keep the right side of hairs frozen as well, I can do the same thing. So I can actually leave that part, go ahead and do the rest of her face. Now, I don't like working with this thing showing, so I'm going to turn my mask off. Then I'm going to go to the forward warp tool. The trick to doing this is use the largest brushes that you can use and do it as slow increments as you can possibly do. So make your brushes soft. I'm going to make mine, I rarely go above a 50% on my brush. A 50% pressure is fine. I'm going to make my brush even larger than it is right now. And then I'm simply going to start slow tapping movements trying to push in from this side. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to push in a little bit, and you'll see I'm pushing primarily this background area right here. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I'm going to crank my density up. I'm going to pull it up to around an 80. That'll put more action at the edge of the brush. And I'm going to start to work my way in here. My brush is too big. Make it a little bit smaller. And just start to do these small taps in to bring this all the way around. And this is where the artistry of this comes in, is that how do you shape the hair to actually make it believable? So I'm going to pull it in just a little bit more. You should probably pull a little bit more hair in with it. You don't want it just to be one single thing. And then I'm going to leave it at this. Now, if you want to see what difference it made, you use your preview check mark to pull it in to turn it on and off. You can see we're distorting the background. That's fine. I've got another background that I could put this on if that ends up being the issue. But this looks good to me. I'm going to turn on my show mask again. I've frozen this side of her hair on this side. I want to pull it in slightly as well. So I'm going to grab my thaw tool and I'm going to simply thaw the side of this out. I'm not going to thaw her face. I still want that frozen. I'm then going to go back to this tool and just push in slightly on the other side. And she's just gone from, I'm going to bring the top down a little bit as well. She just went from the 1980s to the 1990s. And that's the difference. Is this working for you guys?
I have a question.
Shoot.
So if the background were to get too warped, technically, is there a tool where you could like freeze just her body?
Yes. So it's not freezing just her body or freezing the outside. This is no, but it's a great question, and I'm going to show you how you fix it right now. So we've pulled this in, and you can see using the preview checkmark, whatever, we've distorted the background, and people don't want to distort the background, right? Especially if it's something recognizable like texture, like brick or that kind of stuff. It'll look completely distorted. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. The way we would fix this, I'm going to go ahead and leave her body the way it is right now. But the way I would fix this is that I'm going to go back to I'm going to turn that smart object off. I'm going to go back to my background layer, and I'm going to make another copy of this, Command J, to make a copy of it. I need a background without a figure now. So to get that, I'm going to come up to my select. So does everybody have this second background copy made? I'm going to come up to my select menu, and I'm going to come down to select subject. And it does a pretty good job of it. I'm going to expand this though a little bit. I want to make sure that I'm getting everything. So I'm going to come up to the select menu, down to modify, down to expand, and I'm going to put in 10 pixels and we'll see what happens. And 10 pixels does a pretty good job of it. I'm actually around that right now. Now, in my case, the best way, the most successful way of doing this is actually AI. So to fix this with the selection made, I don't see my AI tool control bar right now. To get it, if you don't see it, if the toolbar is always showing you've got it, I don't have it. I don't like keeping it out there the whole time. Come up to your window menu and come down to contextual taskbar. It will open up, and what you want with your selection made right now, you want to simply hit, you don't want to fill in anything. You don't want to hit remove, you want to hit generative fill. And then don't put in anything in the generative fill part, simply hit generate. And it's going to go through the process of doing this. We get into generative fill and AI in a deeper level than where we are right now. So the first version I get of this doesn't look that great to me, but you remember, you've got options up in the properties panel of the generative fill. You get 3 of them when you do this. So I'm going to click on the one that's right next to it, and that has a little bit better feeling to me. And then I'm going to click on the last one, and the last one seems to me to be the closest to the way the image actually was. So I'm going to go with the last version of this. And then I'm going to come back to my image, and I'm going to turn it on. And now again, I've got the distorted background that's here in this image. So instead, I'm going to come up to the select menu, down to subject. And it's still on the background layer down here. So Command D to deselect, or the deselect button. Come back up to my top image and select subject. And I don't need the generative fill toolbar here right now, so I can click on the little 3 dots and say, hide this bar. And I'm just going to put a layer mask on here. So now I'm much closer to my original undistorted background. Make sense? You guys follow that one? Okay. And so, again, this is the difference. If you hold down your Option key and click on the beginning, this is where we were. This is how we are now. Works like a dream. All right, you can close this up. You can close the girls up. We're going to take a look at one more thing. So also in the folder called Liquify New Files, there's a thing in there called Orange. They're oranges. I want you to actually open that up into Photoshop. So when I look at the oranges, I want to undistort this one orange that's right here. They're all dried oranges, but I just don't like the shape of this guy. I just want to smooth this out or round this out a little bit more. And I'm hoping, or just to give this whole thing a better shape, I'm hoping Liquify will actually do that for me. But we'll find out right now. The first thing I'm going to do is actually select this thing. So to select it, I'm going to go to the Quick Selection tool. And I'm going to try to select it, and hopefully it'll give me the whole orange. And if you lose part of the edge, you're better off getting that part. And that part looks good to me right now. And I'm going to jump this to its own layer, Command J. And now I've got an orange that is on its own layer. And yeah, that part looks pretty much right there. I'm going to turn this into a smart object. Layer, smart objects, convert to smart object, and then into the Liquify workspace. So filter, Liquify. I'm going to zoom in on this. And then I am going to use the push forward warp tool and a little bit smaller and check it. It's set probably about right. And I'm just going to try to reshape this a little bit more so that it looks a little bit more orange-like. Be careful about, I don't want to distort this too much in here, but I can pull this part out so that it's beginning to look slightly more orange, but you don't want to go any further than you need to go. However, I don't know what this is doing in relationship to my image. To see your image, come over to your Properties panel, and there's a thing that says Show Backdrop. If you click on your Show Backdrop, it will actually then show you your new orange on the backdrop. Now, in this case, depending on where, we've got our backdrop set to be behind, which is what we would want to do. There's an opacity slider here that'll allow you to go back and forth to see what your change actually is. And this, for me, is as far as I would actually push this image. And I would simply say OK to that. And again, you can see the difference that this thing makes. So I don't want people to think that this is all about just changing the shape of clothes or hairs or noses or whatever. There's one other example that we can do really quickly. You can close that one up. You don't need to save it.
So are these tools used a lot for like body manipulation, you would say, in editorial magazines?
I'm sorry, what?
Would you say that these tools are used for a lot of fashion and editorial magazines?
Absolutely, and we're going to talk about that also later. But once we get through this, we're actually going to we can do this with this. I was going to go to a different image, but we'll do this with one more photograph that is fashion. So if you can find, it's the last one in here. It's this one called D99K whatever blah blah whatever. Bring that one. Open that guy up. So just so that you guys know, when I first started shooting fashion, this was the kind of stuff that I shot. Nice, right? So here, all I want to do is to soften up those shoulders just a little bit, right? So again, I'm going to hit Command J to make a copy of it, take this and to create this as a smart object, convert it to a smart object. Then I'm going to go into the liquify space. And in all likelihood, I would probably have copied this like I did the other image first, but you'll get the idea. So I don't want to change a lot of this part. I just want to change the part of this sleeve that's up in here. So I am going to freeze this inside, make my brush a little bit smaller. I'm going to freeze this part in here. I got the warning to show the mask. So I'm going to freeze this part right into here, all the way down to her elbow. And I feel that's pretty good in there. I'm going to uncheck show mask, push the forward warp tool a little bit smaller. And then again, I'm just going to start to tap and tap and tap to work my way in. And I can still, I don't know that I need to get all the way in to where it was originally frozen. Let me make sure my mask is, yeah, my mask is a little too tight right there. So I'm going to turn it on again. I'm going to slightly thaw out just this small part here so that I get a better line in here. That part I'm going to thaw out. And then back up to the push and bring this all down in here. I've got this one weird little point right there, so I'm going to make my brush incredibly small and then just push that guy in. And this is my difference. So you can see that this gives you a lot of flexibility. Do I think that's thin enough? Not really. I will actually continue to work on that. I think the sleeve area in here is also a little bit too big, whatever, just to shape it into what would be a more conventional sleeve, but yeah. So again, if you're uncomfortable doing this, you don't need to do this, but I'm going to show you what your homework is. And I've had people do this before, so I don't want to say you can't do this. If you can't do this or don't want to do this, you need to come up with something else that you can do and turn something else in. Because what I've found here, and when I say that, oh, if you don't feel comfortable doing this, you don't have to do it, and then just flat out nobody does it. And it's not that anybody's uncomfortable doing it. It's just everybody's like, hey, he gave me a pass, so I'm taking it, right? So the assignment is to, well, here, I'll read you the assignment. Oh, the assignment that you have in your folder is wrong. It's an old assignment. The assignment on our website is correct. So I will send that out to you in an email, but I'll show it to you here really fast. Were you guys impacted by the Amazon thing yesterday? Who wasn't, right? Ugh. And apparently some of us still are. All right, hang on one second. I'm going to read this to you, but it's on our website. The correct version of this is on our website. So the assignment says, for 8.1, use the liquify on this image that I'm showing you, 09, C whatever, to reshape the back of her shoulders and her booty to make the model's clothes seem more normal. Liquify must be done on a smart object layer, and the background of the image should not appear distorted. So those are the keys in here. How do you push this in to shape this so it's more normal, and this part as well, but the background remain largely unchanged? I just showed you how to do that. Questions? Are we good? All right, I'll see you guys next week.